objectives are and explain what the lesson study is, okay? There's a sheet right there. Hey, will you see it?
Yes,
Here you
ma'am.
go. For the introduction, for the lesson focus, I do want us to really focus on the introduction, okay, today. We're gonna plan the whole lesson. But I want us to make sure we feel comfortable with this, because that's one of the pieces that I know that sometimes we can get caught up in if we're not careful, okay? Reading behaviors, because that's one of our focuses anyway right now, right? Comprehension, because that's one of our focuses anyway. And then the pacing of the lesson is just what we're gonna continue working on all year, okay? Now again, we're planning the whole lesson, but these are gonna be the things I want us to kind of focus in on to make sure, all right? And of course, that's the times. But let me explain what a lesson study is. A lesson study is where one, Cassidy, you and I will pretty much today go through what one session of a coaching cycle looks like, okay? We're gonna plan the lesson, we're gonna implement it, and we're gonna debrief about this lesson, and we're gonna think about what we're gonna do next with the kids. That's the next steps, okay?
Okay.
All right. The beauty of a lesson study, though, is that we bring in other people to work with us and to study with us alongside. But then when you and I go into the fishbowl and we're just having our conversation, they are different sets of eyes looking in, so they can come back and tell us what we did in our planning, what they heard us asking, what they heard us saying, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because we can get so caught up in the lesson that we're planning the lesson, we don't even realize some of the things that we do or say, all right? And so from it, we're all learning on what's gonna help us as we continue to go further. That's what it does. Then the next piece is that the two of you, I think you already know this, but I just wanna make sure, the two of you will be the lead teachers for the lesson studies this year. And I have requested that because we're going to take something from what we do today and make it a next step for us, okay? You guys will have each other to talk with, share with, continue to learn together, okay? So that when I come back in January, it's the week of the 25th, I cannot tell you the exact date of when it will be for y'all, but it's that week. When I come back in January for a lesson study, now I'm back next month for status check. I'm talking about the lesson study in January. When I come back for that and it's us, okay? Then what we'll do is we'll take where we are and grow some more. And so in that case, what can happen, what I usually try to do, is that you and I would plan the next one together, okay? But because the two of you are gonna be working on the same next steps, we don't have to start new. Does that make sense from the beginning? It's like,
Right.
Does that kind of help?
Yes.
Okay. So that's kind of what a lesson study looks like. The only thing that I say is that when we go into the fishbowl mode, the only people who can talk are Cassidy and myself during the fishbowl. Then when we come out of the fishbowl, then everybody else joins me in on the conversations. Does that help? Okay. Any questions about what we're gonna do? So, Cassidy and I are gonna go into the fishbowl in just a moment, and as we go into it, we're going to plan our guided reading lesson that we're gonna implement, okay? Now, I know you've already looked over it and you've got some ideas, all right? So we're gonna talk through some of those things, and I'm gonna share some of my ideas with you too. But what I'm gonna ask you guys to do is I want you to take notes on what in the conversations that we're doing, that we're having, can't even talk anymore at the end of the day, conversations we're having, what is it that is going to impact students as we plan, okay? Then also taking notes on what kinds of questions am I posing to help us think a little deeper as we plan for the lesson. And then anything else you wanna jot down. Did I miss anything? I lose my mind after lunch. There's something after lunch, it's like my mind doesn't work well. Okay, so you ready?
Ready.
We're going into the fishbowl, okay? You're gonna be fine. This is easy, okay? So easy. So I have my own copy of this that I printed off. It's not as pretty as yours. I wanna tell you a couple things that I noticed. You sent me, or I was sent the, information about the lesson. I know it's a level I. I know that it's Jake's new jeans. And then I saw that your obstacles is basically the expression, okay? And then also using the quotations and using that expression with it. And so your learning goal is to read with expression and notice what needs to happen within quotation marks. Your area of concern, you really didn't have any at this present moment.
Not with, I didn't want to pick the highest group or the lowest. I kind of did a middle
That's
that
fine.
hadn't met the second grade,
Yeah.
gotten to the end yet, so.
That's fine. So let's do this. Let's take a book for a moment,
Okay.
okay? And hand me one if you don't mind
Okay,
to.
yeah.
All right, because I haven't actually seen the book.
Well,
So-
I read this last Thursday, so.
Good, all
I
right.
have to refresh my memory.
I want us to think about this. One, how many students are in this group?
I think 6.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I want you to think about your 6 students, okay? And I want you to look back through the book, and I want you to think about what might give them an obstacle. What might be something that might be a problem for them as they're reading the text, okay?
Okay.
I'm gonna look at it too, to think of what might be possible obstacles for any student, but since you know your kids, you're gonna be more specific, okay?
See, this book has a lot of quotations and
Uh-huh.
just having them change the way that they're speaking. I have one particular student who's just kind of monotone throughout the whole, and I'm really working with him on trying to show. But they can decode pretty well, and
Okay. That's good. I'm kind of reading the book too, since
Yeah.
I'm looking at it, sorry.
oh, you're fine. We've been working on the bold words, and they can remember the word. They're like, it's bold. Some of them will say, it's black. I'm like, it's a little darker. They haven't seen a lot of words with like hyphens, hand-me-downs.
Uh-huh. Do you think that might be an issue for anybody?
I think they'll be able to say it, but just understand that
Okay.
the understanding of it, like
Okay.
we work with hyphens a lot with
Okay.
math, but
All right, so what I'm hearing you say then is that the hyphens with hand-me-downs and the quotation marks specifically in the dialogue when it goes back and forth too, right?
because we're just basically starting the quotation, like teaching quotations.
Right.
And understanding that they need to change their expressions and stuff
Okay.
like that.
All right. The reason I like to do that, what we're doing right now, okay, is because before we ever even start looking at the introduction, I like to look at the book and think about my kids, okay? Because I don't want what the authors have put down in the bullets to be my only thing I'm thinking about. I want to think about my students themselves. So I like to look and think about what could be the issues. Then what I like to do is turn and look at what the bullets are, okay? Now, I know you've already looked and that's okay, but I'm just letting you know that's the reason why I wanted to do this, because that helps me, all right? So when we think about the introduction of the text, okay? It always talks up there at the top, it says, consider the strengths and needs of the readers. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that one of the things that sometimes is hard for teachers, and you've heard me say it before, I believe, but if not, you're here to hear it now, and that is, guided reading is not about the text. Guided reading is about the reading behaviors that we get students to use in order to help make them better readers. I tell you that because so many teachers, including myself, if we're not careful, we try to take this book and we wring it out almost where we've done everything that's even possible in this book to make sure the kids know it frontwards, backwards, upside down, and everything. Does that make sense? That's not the purpose.
Right.
The book is the vehicle that we're going to use in order to see what behaviors they're using and get them to use some new behaviors that we see they need to use.
Mm-hmm.
Because then the application makes it into the next text, okay? All right. So I tell you that also because when you go to look at this introduction, there's lots of bullets there.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've heard me say before that you don't have to use all the bullets, right?
Right.
Okay? So I'm gonna go a little bit deeper this time and tell you, there are 2 bullets, for the most part, I basically always use, okay? First one,
Mm-hmm.
and the last one. First one because it does what?
Introduces the book and
That's
tells
right.
the title and
Uh-huh.
lets them make predictions
That's
about
right.
the picture and stuff like that. Yeah.
Why do you think the last one?
I guess it's because they are, they haven't read the book and it kind of gives them an overview of why he was worried or what was the problem, and they still can make, what clues did you see in the illustration? They're still just looking at the pictures and
Yeah.
making predictions and stuff.
Yeah. And it also sets up for the purpose.
Right, yeah.
So go back to the beginning of the book and
Mhm.
read to find out what happened with Jake and his genes.
Mhm.
So I'm setting the purpose up for what we're about to do. That's why I always choose those 2,
Right.
okay? Another hint that I love about Fountas and Pinnell is that on the back of the book,
Mhm.
it does what our readers as adults do. Not all level text has that.
Right.
I don't know if y'all have ever noticed that or not. But a lot of different level text we have never has like a little synopsis.
Right.
Like we have when we go choose books. I like that because sometimes I find myself using this. I'm not telling you this is what we're gonna do today, I'm just giving you
Right.
some examples.
Mhm.
I might say, guys, we're gonna read a book, it's called Jake's New Jeans. It's by Miles Zapata, and it's illustrated by Penny Weber. In this story, Jake rarely gets something new. Instead, he usually has to wear his big brother's old clothes. And after getting the worst pair of hand-me-down jeans ever, Jake tries to make the old jeans as cool as possible. But things don't turn out the way he expects. So I've kind of done a little bit of what this
The
does
introduction.
up here. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I don't use this every time, but sometimes I use this in place of just that bullet,
Right.
and then sometimes I use that bullet. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay,
Because you can use this and then you can say, what are you thinking?
That's right.
Or,
Yeah.
piggyback off of it.
absolutely. The other thing about the introduction, I want to keep it as quick and short and as possible, but I want to be able that I give them enough in the introduction for them to be as successful as they can be with a little bit of a productive struggle, okay? And what I mean by that is that I don't want them to be frustrated, but I don't want to do everything in this book
Right.
so that by the time I finish my introduction, there's no use to read the book,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And so I want to make sure that I do enough. The other thing is a productive struggle is where learning takes place. If you stop and think about things in your life where you've learned the most is when you had to really work through something, and then once you worked through it, you learned it and owned it. That's why I say productive struggle, okay?
Mhm.
So, thinking about your readers, all right? You also mentioned 2 important things. You mentioned the hyphen with hand-me-downs, and you mentioned the quotation marks, okay? All right. So, to me, those, because they're gonna be obstacles, The only thing we might wanna do is call attention to the word, have them find the word hand-me-downs, and just tell them that those are hyphens, and that sometimes words will have those, you know?
Right.
And that may be in here. Is it one of the bullets that is in here? Do you remember? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, third.
Yeah. Okay?
Or no, well,
It's actually the fourth bullet. It's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we could actually use that part. Do you see what I'm
it
saying?
says hand-me-downs and several.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. But if we just introduce it one time, okay? Now, when you look at that second bullet, it says, Jake was the younger brother in the family. Why do you think he never had anything new?
Right.
Okay? Well, then it goes on, turn to pages 4 and 5. Jake wore his brother's hand-me-down clothes. Point to the word hand-me-downs in the first sentence. You know, turn to page 8 and 9. So what I'm saying to you, there's nothing wrong with doing these bullets,
Right.
except what is needed most for our kids.
Right. You
So,
could point out the hand-me-down
Yeah.
word and then the quotation if I,
that's
you
right.
know.
So, for example, I just happened to notice this when we were reading. Turn to page 8. Okay? When you look at page 8, 1, hand-me-downs is there.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, you've got the back and forth quotations between Mom and Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm thinking, based upon what you said were some possible interferences, the things they might struggle with, that we could go to this page. We could introduce the book and go to this page.
Mm-hmm.
And we could say, so boys and girls, I want you to find the word hand-me-downs and point to it. And then say, this is really not a word, it's actually 3 different words. But the dashes are there to let me know that's what we call these particular kinds of clothes. They're called hand-me-downs.
Mhm.
Hand-me-downs,
Mhm.
okay? Does anybody know what hand-me-downs is?
Right. See if they know.
Then go from there. The other thing I want to call attention to on this page, notice what this mark is right before the word you. Y'all talked about those, I'm sure, before.
We have, but they're still, they keep
That's
calling
right.
commas and
Right.
so,
Okay.
you know.
In this case, if they're still calling them something different, then I would go find the mark right before the you and find the mark right after the word jeans. We've talked about these words before. We've talked about this symbol, this punctuation before. These are called quotation marks. Everybody say that word for me? Quotation marks. Good. Does anybody remember what kind of words are within quotation marks? Because they can probably tell us that, but they can't remember the word quotation marks. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, come in and bring out what you were talking about how we're going to make that sound like Mom's talking. And then how we're going to make this sound like Ben asked. So we could model this with them and then have them practice that one real quick. You see? And say to them, so, in this book that you're going to read today, you're going to find several pages that have quotation marks on them. And when you come to them, I want you to pay attention because you want to make them sound as if that person's talking to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And you set that part up that you were concerned about. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Think that's doable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, are there any other bullets on here that you think we might need to bring out?
They've worked a lot on the bold words. They
Yeah.
understand you'll see them sometimes like ever,
Uh-huh.
show some
Mhm.
expression. No, I don't know if I do it right all the time, but I'll say, go ahead and picture walk and stop on page 8 and just let them look, and then I'll, talk about whatever, and then say, okay, finish picture walking. When you turn back to the front, I'll let them look at the pictures. I don't know if we
Okay.
necessarily should do that, but.
It's always about purpose. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, stop and look at the pictures for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Does this group of kids need to actually look at all the pictures before they read the text
Not
because it's gonna help
necessarily.
them understand it?
Right.
Or is this a text that they could actually just look at the pictures when they're reading for understanding?
They could, yeah, I mean, they can.
Okay, the only
Yeah.
reason I'm asking that is because there are
Yeah,
some
yeah.
books that you need to look at the pictures
Right.
before,
Right.
okay? But there's some books that the pictures themselves are not anything that's just really gonna make a difference if
Right.
I look at them ahead of time or not. So it comes back to purpose.
Mhm.
When do I do a picture walk?
Right.
When do I not need one?
Right.
So you have to ask yourself that question.
Right.
What's the purpose of it?
I think I mostly have done it because I like to look
Right.
at the pictures
That's right.
first. So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, okay, and it doesn't take long, but
Yeah.
I won't. I mean, I definitely won't do it today.
No, but you see what I'm trying to say though.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
The pictures, they're good readers. I mean, you know, they're on their way to moving up. So, no, not necessarily.
So what you could say today is that, so when we set them up to read,
Mm-hmm.
we're not doing a picture walk today because I want you to do what readers do when they're actually reading.
Right.
And that is. So today, when you're reading, take the time when you finish reading to look at the picture for a moment before you turn the page.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we do as readers,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't always just look at the pictures before we read.
No. Mm-hmm.
So there again, it comes back to setting purpose. Now I hope you're hearing me, Cassie, when I say you're not doing anything wrong by have been doing a picture walk every time, okay? Because that is one of the first stages that you start out with students.
Mm-hmm.
But now, don't worry about it. But now you're in second grade,
Right.
right? And now the Hilton's calling. Hilton, Grant, and Orlando. Haven't been to Orlando. Anyway, now that they're in second grade, they don't really need
Right.
to have to do that at this present moment unless the purpose is there. Does that make
My
sense?
C and D group.
Uh-huh. Your C and D group may still need that
Mhm.
scaffold for them just yet.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is an I group, they're reading pretty good, may
Right.
not need it.
Right.
Sometimes a nonfiction text, they may need it a little bit more.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they may need, in some fiction text. Because even today with third grade, we were looking at a text and the pictures actually are telling more than the thing, than the words are. So it could have been that we could have done that.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you're
yeah.
understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that way, we could do that just by simply saying, we're not gonna do a picture walk today. We're gonna do what good readers do. We're just gonna take a look at the pictures as we read. But I do want you to turn to page 8.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely say this group and my next up don't, but like my one below this,
Mm-hmm.
I can see as they're reading, you can see them, and then they'll look to try to figure out the word, and then they'll figure it
Yeah.
out, kind of, you know. So, but yeah,
All right.
I'm fine with that.
Good. So here's what my next thing is that the way I tend to do this, and y'all know me because y'all been with me a while, I use sticky notes, okay? Because we're talking about the pacing of the lesson, okay? And with that pacing of the lesson, what I have found myself, because if I don't use sticky notes, because I have this, but if I have a black and white copy,
Mm-hmm.
I will often just write out to the side what I'm doing, because I find myself, if I just circle or highlight the bullets, I still have to go and kind of read the bullet a minute to know what I'm doing. But if I come here, and I'm not gonna do my sticky note this time, I'm just gonna do it right here,
Mm-hmm.
and I put title, I put,
This.
back cover, right, so I can read the back cover. And then I might do the question, because the question here was, so what are you thinking, just based upon the book? To give them a chance to think about what might be going through their head as they're doing, that might be what I do for that first bullet. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I just write down keywords. Then my next one would be page 8, and I would put,
Hand me down.
hand-me-downs, and I would put down the quotation. Mhm. Because you know what you're gonna do with it now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And so all you gotta do is be able to just look at to where I'm headed next. Then purpose, is the last one. And that purpose was to find out what happened with Jake and his jeans. And I'll just put happens, Jake, jeans, to help me remember. But those are my words that I need. I'm not saying those are words that you would need.
Right.
You see what I mean? But those are the kinds of things that I do because it helps with the pacing of the lesson. Because very quickly, da-da, da-da, turn to page 8, da-da-da-da-da. Now we're going to read the book and see what happens with Jake and his jeans. And it goes by so much quicker, and I don't feel like myself having to go back and forth between this. I'm just looking at the keywords and phrases.
When do you hand them their book?
When I get ready to hand them, in between this part and I'm handing out, so turn to page 8.
Okay. So introduce it then when we're ready to turn the page up. That's what I've been doing, the introduction, before I hand it to them, because I don't want them to
Yeah,
flip through it while I'm trying to
that's
talk.
right. That's right.
So okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, because that's what I normally do, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yes. So, in the introduction, because we're doing this together, you have options today, okay? I want you to do some of the lesson, but I want you to do what you feel comfortable with, all right? I want you to do all the lesson if you feel comfortable with all the lesson, all right? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna help you by doing pieces that, one, that you would like to see me do, or two, help you by simply doing what I call a whisper, or not like a whisper coaching, but it's kind of like I'll go, do you mind if I say something to the kids a minute? May I ask them a question?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna always ask you something like that if you're teaching the part and I see something else I could add to it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's what I'll do,
Okay.
all right? So in the introduction, is this something that you would like to do and me do like that, what I'm talking about, or would you like to see me do it?
I think I can handle the introduction.
I know you can, but I want you to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'm an
Okay.
outgoing person. You
Okay.
don't have to worry about me.
Good. All right. So why don't we take just a moment and give you a chance, since we don't write, to jot down whatever you want to jot down, so you're
Okay.
ready for that introduction before we go any further.
It's probably the same as you. I'll
Probably.
just say, today we're gonna read a new book. So title, and then I'll go to the back cover, give an overview. I'll say, now I want you to get your book and turn to page 8.
Uh-huh.
Remind myself page 8.
Yeah.
And then when I get there, we'll talk about hand-me-downs, and with the hyphens and quotation marks.
Yep.
And then I'll read the first one of Mom, and I'll let them read the second one of Ben. His
Uh-huh.
name was Ben.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll go to the purpose
Mm-hmm.
at the end, and I will say, now I'll probably just say, I want you to read and find out what happens with Jake and his jeans.
That's right. Very simple. It'll be quick, to the point, and it's enough, don't you think, that they can be successful with the text.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
So we got the introduction done.
Yes. I agree.
Good.
This. You'll see them doing this the whole time. I'm like, when they'll like do this, and I'm like, you need to say, what do you think? They're like, to the person next to them, like, what you agree with, then?
I love it. Okay, so this is a level I that we already talked about.
Mhm.
So I want to go to a couple of places here, so just bear with me, okay? One, you mentioned in your but your thing, was area concern was basically you didn't have any. No, you want the learn goal. Sorry, I looked at the wrong one.
Oh, you're right.
Your lesson goals to read with expression and notice what needs to happen within quotation marks. Okay. So because that's our goal,
No,
It's
I'm
okay.
just making sure it
hey,
was
mine
mine.
rang too.
I don't know why it's even turned up.
What's our goal? Since that's our goal, one of the things that we have to really begin to work on and refine in our teaching, our craft of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
is how to be responsive to our learners, all right? And if you remember back in PD, you probably remember the words I mentioned, teach, prompt, and reinforce. Remember I was talking about those? Well, y'all are getting these. Heideman's just slow. They've ordered them for you. The prompting guides. So I've gone ahead and opted today to show you how we could utilize it, okay? Because hopefully they're gonna be in before we would do this again in January. If they're not, Hyman has a problem, okay? All right. So the way I look at it is that here is the gray section, that's like a table of contents. You have your big